Hey guys, what is up and welcome to another League of Legends commentary. In this game you will see a pretty cool 4v5 comeback that we do since our ADC ankle spanking just happened to have really bad internet problems that day and he actually ended up DCing around level 8. So it ended up being 4v5 for most of the game, but I mean overall it was really close, really intense, and I think it'll be a pretty cool watch for you guys. But as that's happening in the background, I want to talk to you guys about a very special topic for this video. I want to lay down a lot of points and notes that I wrote down on Notepad not too long ago explaining why I believe Yasuo is just so good and probably OP. However, before I dive into that, I want to ask you guys a very simple question. Do you want to see live full game commentaries of me playing, where I will be talking about what I do, just trying to give as much commentary as I can, explain my thought process. You guys can see maybe, plays or whatever the case may be that I do just live as opposed to kind of me talking over it in a video. Hopefully that'll be a pretty cool learning experience for you guys. It's kind of like watching a stream, so if you're down for that and you want to see that in the comments below, please tell me. But now that that's out of the way, let's jump straight into why I think Yasuo is so good. So long story short, his kit is probably one of the best in terms of synergy. So let's go through each of his abilities and I'll give you guys more information as to why I say this. So his passive has two effects. Honestly, one of them just by itself can already be considered good enough for a passive just by itself. But the fact that he has two of them and two passives that are both just very good is pretty big, I think. I mean, double crit chance is huge, even though it has of course the 10% damage reduction that's applied to it. But honestly, that doesn't really matter that much, especially since his Q can also critically strike. Then you have his passive that grants him flow, which, once it's full, it will proc to give him a shield whenever he takes damage from a champion. So this is extremely good of a passive, but I feel like it's a little too easy to reactivate once the flow has been depleted, mainly because of his E and partially because of his W. But we'll go into that a bit later. So let's go into his Q. So this ability, of course, ends up having a very low cooldown reduction. I think it stops at around 1.33 seconds of CDR, and of course, the CDR does go down based on the attack speed that Yasuo has. So I could be wrong, but if he hits level 18 without getting any form of attack speed from runes, masteries, or items, I think he can get his passive down to about 1.6 or 1.8 just from his own stats leveling up. But of course that's a little long of a wait and you want to get that to 1.33 as soon as possible, so you end up getting a lot of attack speed items like a Shiv. But that's not necessarily the point. I mean, building attack speed to reduce the Q cooldown is great and all, especially considering the fact that it also helps his passive, the critical strike chance, so obviously he'll critically strike more. But his Q with the really short cooldown also procs on hit effects. This is one of the biggest factors I think that makes this Q just extremely good. So if you are unaware, it will proc things like a static Shiv's fully stacked charge, it will proc critical strikes, it will proc any lifesteal you have from maybe Bloodthirster and anything like that, even red buff as well. But it does not stop there just yet. On top of this Q, being able to proc things like that, it also has base damage, which I believe stops at about 100 at level 5, plus 100% of his AD. Usually, it's pretty common to see these kind of skills say plus 100% of your bonus AD, but no, Yasuo has base damage on the Q. I mean, it's not all that much, but regardless, 100 base damage plus 100% of his total AD. This obviously means that on top of him attacking extremely fast because of all the attack speed items you bought to get your QCD down to 1.33 seconds, every single 1.33 seconds, you'll be able to throw out a Q. That's pretty much your auto attack and then some as well. When you really think about it, that's quite a lot of damage coming out very fast. But now let's jump into his W, the Wind Wall. This spell has probably some of the highest controversy among many League players just because of how much it can just block. So like I said, it is probably the most game-changing spell so far that has been released in League of Legends. All you need with this skill is just some semi-good reaction time and chances are you'll be doing great things with this ability. It blocks almost anything that is projectile based, but luckily it does not block turret shots, which would have been really bad if it did. So with this in mind, it obviously will block things like ultimates, like a Jinx ulti, an Ashe arrow, a Caitlyn ulti. It will block auto attacks from ADCs, which brings me to my next point. The W can make ADCs and or mages quite useless for actually a pretty decent amount of time, assuming your wall is level 5, because the width of course is longer. Quite useless in a team fight because they won't be able to cast any spells unless, with some exceptions like maybe a Ziggs ulti or a Syndra Q. And the ADC obviously will not be able to attack through the wall. Also, if you did not know, this is also pretty interesting, it can block auto attacks from Dragon and Baron. Now that is not necessarily like a huge game breaking thing, but if you think about everything else that it already does and you just add this on top of it, I mean, you know, you're just adding a lot of sweet stuff to something that's already pretty good. But that's just the active effect. Don't forget, the windmill also has a passive. The passive is of course quite straightforward, and what it does is it increases the passive regeneration, the flow, whenever he uses his E, the dash, or his ultimate. So speaking of his E, let's jump into that ability right now, because I feel like that's also another one that just molds the greatness of Yasuo. So his E obviously gives him quite the ridiculous amount of mobility around enemy minions, or even jungle minions to be safe. It is extremely hard to catch him. You've seen probably many clips from myself, maybe other YouTubers, or just, you know, random people that just post a really cool clip of or highlight of themselves playing, where they're just jumping around the E. The enemy players or just the one champion cannot seem to react or catch up to him in time. And this results in the enemy champions not only not able to just really do anything about it unless they have some sort of lock on, like maybe a Vi ulti, but they also have a high chance of missing a lot of skill shots because he's just flying around the map pretty much. But this is not the main thing. The reason I like his E a lot is because he has a lot of time to decide when the Yasuo player wants to engage or disengage. So he can pretty much just be E'ing around, going on the minions, maybe just waiting for the right moment, stacking up the damage, of course, let's not forget that. As he's dashing around looking for the right time to re-engage, he's also using his Q to stack it up to 3 chargers. At the same time of all of this, he's stacking up his E damage to about 100% increased damage. This means that during that time you probably cannot catch up to him, and once he realizes that he's in a pretty good situation to go back in, his E's dealing more damage, his passive is back to fully charged, his Q is 3 stacks, and he E's on you, and suddenly he's doing a lot of damage. So overall, I mean, based on this, you can obviously determine that his E is just amazing. It's just so good. It gives him so much mobility. It synergizes so well with his passive, even with his Q, let's be honest, and his W, which in turn synergizes with the passive again. Alright, but that's enough praising his E. Let's go now into his ultimates. So Yasuo's ultimate is obviously probably one of the biggest teamfight changing ultimates in the game, especially for an assassin. It works off of any knockup that your allies can inflict, and a 3 or 5 man ulti can literally decide the battle. I said this in my top 5 assassins video, but most assassins tend to have trouble of bringing really good AoE to a team fight because assassins obviously are usually built to just get on one target, get on them well, deal a lot of damage, burst that target down, and then usually try and get out. A really good example of this is of course a Zed or maybe even a Kali, or even Talon. But no. Yasuo is not just good at killing one target, he's good at team fighting in general. Not only does he bring that really sweet knockup, but he can easily follow up with his knockup or an ally team knockup with his ultimate, which obviously suspends people in the air for about 1 second, giving your team and even yourself plenty of time to react to this, position themselves, and get ready for the next move. And of course, on top of that, he also gets 50% bonus armor pen. Now, unless I'm mistaken, I'm pretty sure this 50% bonus armor pen applies to him as a champion, meaning that it will apply to anyone that he auto attacks, which I honestly found a little interesting because at first read, what I thought it would do is once he ultis, like maybe the 3 people that he gets in his ultimate, only those people will have the 50% armor reduction to Yasuo. The fact that Yasuo just flat out gets 50% bonus armor pen no matter who he's hitting after his ultimate is done, I think is a little weird. So honestly, I feel like Riot should change it to just the people that he ultis in the air, only them, this Yasuo, get the 50% bonus armor pen. That would make so much more sense to me. Then, with his ultimate, he also has immense range on it. I believe that the range on Yasuo's ultimate is 1300, but let's take that into comparison so we get a better idea of just how far that is. Let's look at someone like Lux, who's known for that ultimate being very long range and just being able to snipe people from afar. Her ultimate's range is 3000, Yasuo's 1300, so his ultimate's range is about half the range of a Lux ultimate, and that thing's already damn long. But currently, as I'm making this video before the patch hits, the distance traveled to your target builds up the passive as well. Of course, I'm referring to the flow and the shield. However, once this video is released, I think the new patch will be released as well, which, from what I've read, if it is correct, instead of his passive getting built up based on the range that he traveled by his ultimates, apparently now his passive will just get flat out fully stacked every single time he uses ultimates. When I read that, I was like, why? Just why? I don't understand the thought process behind this. From what I'm getting is that Riot is trying to make this guy more of a fighter rather than what he is currently, an assassin. But I don't think that's the way to do it. I don't think they're accomplishing what they're trying to do. So maybe this is like a testing phase, I'm not really sure, but they just literally buffed Yasuo. And then let's look at the one more thing that his ultimate offers that is also just extremely good. You can use your Q while you are in the air with the enemy champions and slashing at them. I have mentioned this in my other videos and I'll mention it once more. You can Q mid ulti. Now that is what I call just pretty stupid. So all in all, he seems so broken and good because he probably just simply has one of the best kit synergies in the game. Every single skill that Yasuo has, literally every single skill he has, benefits another skill. So there isn't just one skill that is pretty much just for itself. So for instance, let's think about Akali's ultimate. It's just a target. You just target someone, you dash to them, okay, cool. But with Yasuo, every single time he is doing something, he's also always doing something else at the same time. For instance, let's say you're E'ing around, like I mentioned earlier, you're dashing through the minions. What are you doing? Let's analyze exactly what is happening during that situation. At first glance, you might be just like, oh, Yasuo is just being very elusive and he's just trying not to get hit and he's just kiting his opponent around. But really, by now, you guys should be a lot more aware of what he really is doing. Sure, he obviously is kiting his opponent around and being very elusive and hard to attack, but what else is he doing? He's stacking up his passive shield. He's obviously using his E and Q to stack up his Q to 3 stacks, clearly buying enough time to try and wait for the right opening. And on top of all that, he's also stacking up the damage increase on his E up to 100% increase. Oh, and let's not forget that his W also increases the amount of flow that he gains based on how much he uses his E. That's a cool fact that I mentioned in my Did You Know. If you're not aware, once you have level 5 wind wall, it only requires 4 dashes on your E to get your full shield back up from 0. Other examples obviously include his Q working with his passive crit chance. And the fact that you have to reduce the cooldown with attack speed also works for his passive crit chance. His W of course works extremely well with his ultimate and his E. His ulti also works with his passive and his Q. His E we just went through. And his passive pretty much synergizes with almost every single skill that he has. So like I said, the reason he's such a good champion, the reason he just seems so OP, is because he just synergizes so well. But this also begs the question, is Yasuo considered OP? It's honestly, I think, still a bit early to tell. I mean, I think he's extremely good. I feel very confident when I play him. Just the fact that I feel like I can make so many plays with him just because he's so mobile and he's just so good at making really sweet plays and turnarounds. But he's also not necessarily the easiest champion. If I had to say something, I would say he's a bit OP, and I think the way to nerf him would be, for example, to change his ultimate, like I mentioned, to only have the 50% bonus armor pen on the targets that you actually hit with your ultimates. I think his Q should be changed around to maybe not having the ability to proc on hit effects, or not having the ability to give him 100% of his AD as a bonus damage amplification, but instead maybe the bonus AD or something of the sort. All in all, this champion is obviously in a very interesting situation. I'm sure Riot is kind of scratching their head trying to get him in a very good position because he's kind of like all over the place right now. He's either extremely overpowered or he's extremely useless. But that is the end of this video, guys, of me analyzing Yasuo and just telling you guys why I think he's good, going through each single skill and trying to give you guys the rundown on why I think he's so good and all that synergy that he has. Please give this video a like, guys, if you did enjoy it, and also subscribe to this channel if you haven't, and also follow me on my social medias, Facebook and Twitter. The description down below does contain the link. But as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this and I hope to see you next time. Peace.